Hello everyone. So today I'm going to talk about something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So that's a pretty interesting topic. The word can be a little bit confusing because dysphoria is usually commonly thought of like a physical sense, but in this case it's more of a mental and emotional sense. So what is rejection sensitivity dysphoria? Well, rejection sensitivity dysphoria is basically a core rejection wound, a rejection of self at its core. And when you reject yourself, you reject others as well. And so, a lot of autistic people have a pretty harsh rejection wound. Think about it like this. Imagine that the time that you're born into this world, all of your body language is rejected by other people. People think you're weird just because you're flapping your wrists, or just because you need to move all the time. If you're rocking back and forth, vestibular stimulation, then they think that you have to go to the bathroom. There's all of this rejection, basically, from birth that happens, and ultimately, this kind of rejection creates a really deep emotional wound that can be incredibly difficult to navigate and even difficult to become aware of. So I read an entire book. It's a fantastic read. It's called Heal Your Wounds, Heal Your True Self by Lise Bourbeau. Definitely recommend to give it a read if you haven't. And I read through this whole book maybe 2 years ago. And I read through all of the wounds: rejection, humiliation, betrayal, abandonment, and injustice. I read through all of those, and rejection was the first chapter in the book. And I said, nope, that's not my wound. It was hilarious because, yeah, that was my wound. So when you're reading this book, if there's any wound that pops out at you like, that can't be me, and you feel really strongly that it can't be your wound, then it might just be your wound. So what does a rejection wound look like? A rejection wound in an autistic sense means not stimming. It means suppressing your stims to appease the social majority. It means suppressing your true expression to appease other people. That's what it means in an autistic sense. But even in a non-autistic sense, what is a rejection wound? Rejection wound can be anything encompassing a rejection of self. So that can mean not speaking your mind when you feel like you should. That can mean negative self-talk. I'll give a few examples of some rejection wound negative self-talk. If only I had this, then I could have that. This is kind of a rejection in a sense. Other examples of negative self-talk for a rejection wound might be something like, if they don't love me, no one will. Because then that implies that there's only one person in the world who could love you, which is fundamentally incorrect if you really think about it. Like, why are we all subscribing to that idea that there is only one perfect match? Like, that's not a thing. Technically anyone could be your perfect match if you're both willing to put in the effort and communicate. But I digress. Anyways, a rejection wound, other examples of that could be something like not eating enough, or not drinking water, or not taking care of yourself. If you frequently find yourself putting absolutely everyone else's needs before yours, that's probably a rejection wound. And now, those of you who have kids might be saying, well, I have kids, it's different. Well, you can't pour from an empty cup. I do understand that you have to keep children alive, of course. But if you're so stressed out and so overwhelmed because you're not making any of your needs, if you're not taking care of yourself, not only are you setting that as an example for your kids, but you're also suffering. And unhappy parent, you think there's going to be happy kids from that? No. So you got to meet your own needs first. You got to align with yourself first. A lot of people really struggle with this type of rejection wound for many reasons, because society kind of profits off of self-rejections. A lot of makeup companies are like, you have to buy this product to make your skin look like this. And sometimes that can be related to a rejection wound because you reject how you look. You reject the way your parents are because you don't want to be like your parents, because if you were, oh my gosh, that would be horrible. except it probably wouldn't, and you probably are like your parents, whether you are consciously aware of that or not. Even if you're not, even if you're like, no, I'm pretty different from my parents, we're like totally different people, there's still a lot of elements. So the way that wounds work is they're quite generational. Usually, not 100%, but usually whatever wounds your grandparents have, it kind of skips a generation. Because if you think about it, if you have a deep rejection wound and you have kids, you're going to be like, okay, I want to make sure that no matter what I do, my kids won't be rejected. So you're going to try to set them up of a life that won't have any type of rejection in it. Now, regardless of whether or not they can see that, or that's how they feel, usually these wounds will kind of skip a generation. So if you're trying to figure out what is my wound, how can I fix it, you can actually look at your grandparents as an example of this. It's pretty crazy how it fractalizes. And so other examples of self-rejection, it could be putting way more energy into relationships than other people. Way more. So when you're not matching energy, if you're giving a lot to another person and they're not giving back, that's the classic example of a rejection wound. It could be something like buying a bunch of gifts for someone that you think is really cool, and then they don't respond or appreciate it or do anything back. That's a rejection wound. And so a lot of times it can be hard to even consciously become aware of our wounds because we're so accustomed to hiding. The ego likes to try to hide itself so you won't see the way that is masking your spirit. And it can be challenging to be able to do this level of self-analysis. It's something that's really scary and most people shy away from because it forces them to confront their deepest fears. What if I get rejected? What if I go up and talk to those people and they don't like me? What if I go and say the wrong thing? What if I go up there and I embarrass myself in front of everyone? What if I go up there and act and people think I'm weird? All of these are forms of rejection or embarrassment in that case. And sometimes these wounds can even be tied together. One way that I was rejecting myself when I didn't know I was autistic was stimming. In fact, it got so bad of a self-rejection that my body, for 10 years almost? At least 8 years, started giving me physical pain. And I mean straight up, real, live physical pain. When I was 16 years old, I was in so much physical pain, I didn't know what to do. I went to the doctor, I told them, hey, all of my joints are cracking, everything hurts, I have so much tension, I don't know what to do. And they ran some tests and they're like, everything's great. And I'm like, everything's not great. Everything's definitely not great. Why aren't you listening to me? That's a different topic in itself, but basically when I was 16, I was like, I need to do something. I need to figure out how to get all of this pain to stop. I went to a chiropractor, and for 3 weeks, I was in no pain. That first chiropractic adjustment fixed everything. And then I started realizing, oh my gosh, a lot of my pain is tied to bad posture. Bad posture can also be a form of self-rejection in many different ways. So I started prioritizing posture. I'm like, okay, if this is truly the cause of my pain, let me sit upright. Let me focus on the way that I'm sitting, and let me stand tall, and let me try to keep my back straight. And that helped a lot, but ultimately all of this was kind of a band-aid of a sort. Yes, chiropractic care is absolutely amazing, and yes, I do recommend it for maybe monthly or monthly or every 2 months, but it is a band-aid for the original problems. So when you have a rejection wound, the more you're rejecting yourself, the more your body's going to create physical pain and inflammation. Every physical symptom that you experience is directly tied to the spirit. It's directly tied to your habits in particular. If you don't like the word spirit, or if you're not spiritual or religious or whatever, if that doesn't vibe with you, then just replace it with the word mind or self. It's the same thing. So everything in the body is all connected. People like to say, oh, you're just sad, or you're just that. It's not like the brain exists in a vacuum. It doesn't. The brain, the body, and your consciousness, they are all interlinked as one. You have to consider the whole system. So once I realized that this was a rejection wound, once I realized I was autistic, I realized all the ways I was rejecting myself before. I realized, oh my God, I'm really subjecting my body to so much pain by not being my true self, by conforming to what other people are expecting, by masking. Masking takes up so much energy. And to an extent, masking is a form of self-rejection. Because masking says people are only going to like me if I follow this specific algorithm of criteria of body language. You are literally adjusting your body language and your tone of voice, and that is masking. And it is exhausting. It is absolutely so exhausting. And the problem is, it's so hard to even know when you're masking when you're accustomed to a lifetime of doing it. It took me about a year of solid conscious focus to be able to unmask. And even now, I don't know if I've unmasked fully. I really have no idea. I actually recommend a microdose of cannabis for this purpose. Like the legal amounts, 3 milligrams, that's enough to help the unmasking. Because basically it reduces all of the pain and allows you to start to really analyze your habit patterns and to do that deeper shadow work. Of course, you can do it without substances as well, but sometimes they can help be a catalyst. Cannabis itself actually was the catalyst for my discovery that I'm autistic, and has been an extremely helpful tool for me to use to be able to really analyze and understand why neurotypical people do what they do. And these analysis, these revelations have been so fascinating. I write them down. But the point is that in order to be able to heal your wounds, you must first become aware of them. And oftentimes that's the hardest part, because the shadow will do anything so that you won't see it. Because if you admit that you have a shadow, then you're admitting that you have flaws. If you admit you have flaws, you're admitting that you're not perfect. And if you're admitting that you're not perfect, it can be very triggering. What if people don't like me? What if I embarrass myself? What if, all of these what if scenarios. So it can lead to a lifetime of negative self-talk. I'll give a perfect example. I'm not going to give names, but I have an experience that happened when I was 8 years old, and I was clothes shopping with someone. And I tried on a shirt, and the shirt didn't fit. Now, I was like 8, like I said, and I wasn't a particularly fat or skinny child. I was just kind of a regularly sized child. Anyways, basically the shirt was too small. It didn't fit. And the person that I was with had said, "I hope you don't have diabetes." And it just kind of jarred me. I was 8. I was like, what do you mean? Like, that was a huge thing that I still remember, and it's kind of a painful memory in a way, but also it helped me become aware of my wounds in that moment, because it was so triggering. Thinking about it years later, I can see now that was the development of my embarrassment wound, which led me down in a path of embarrassment into middle school, and middle school, as hellish as it was, actually helped me resolve that embarrassment wound. The point is, despite the fact that that's absolutely not something an 8-year-old child should ever have to hear, think about the person saying that. Would someone who is healed say something like that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And in fact, the person who said that had a very deep abandonment and subtype humiliation wound. When people say mean things, it is a reflection of them. It's a reflection of their wounds, and it's a reflection of their projections, and that's something that has absolutely nothing to do with you. And that's why it's so easy for me whenever I hear people say mean things. It just doesn't affect me at all anymore. Because I know that's them. And I know that I don't have to internalize it. I know I have other options. I know that my analysis of everything I've been through has brought me to this wonderful point in my life where I can analyze all my habits and select only the ones that are serving me. I've been able to let go of everything that's harming me, even from an emotional perspective and mental. Maybe there's a couple memories that are still there, a little bit of PTSD perhaps, but I've found ways of rewiring it, and it's really powerful to be able to have that transmutation. And so I really encourage you to think about your wounds, think about all of your experiences, and think about the roots of your wounds. Whenever you feel triggered from something that someone does or something says, ask yourself, why do I feel triggered right now? What am I feeling, and why am I feeling that? And sometimes with delayed processing, maybe that's a really hard question. I mean, it took me 26 years to figure out that I was autistic from pattern recognition. Doctors didn't figure it out. I'm not like I was really attending therapy or anything like that, but as obvious as it seems in hindsight, it was missed. And that's why I wish I would have known sooner. That's honestly why. If I had known that I was autistic in elementary school, I was a confident enough kid that I would have just understood it. I feel like that would have shifted the whole rejection pattern that I fell into. Now, it's easy to say that in hindsight, maybe that wouldn't have happened. Maybe I would have rejected in some other way. Who knows? But awareness of self is absolutely key. Awareness of the problem is the first step to solving any problem. And so, the more you're willing to have these conversations with yourself and with others, the more vulnerable you're willing to be with yourself, the more free of these dysfunctions you'll be. And what greater power is there than to free yourself of your problems? To be able to heal to such a point that you become absolutely untouchable. That no matter what your external circumstance is, you love yourself. You can smile in the mirror and say, I'm beautiful. You can joyously laugh because life is about joy and expression of self and excitement. Joy is about appreciation. I meant to say life is about appreciation, but yeah, that too. And it's a beautiful thing. They don't call it the present for no reason. Every single day is a gift to all of us to learn more about self, to learn more about spirit, and to learn what it really means to be human. And I think that's a beautiful thing.